Hey folks, this is JR with DIY Prepper. Welcome to the channel. As preppers, a lot of the time we tend to focus most of our efforts on three primary areas, and those are beans, bullets, and big barrels of water. But there are some other things that we should be doing to help our preps be more well-rounded. And when I say that, I mean more than just having those things along with a big closet full of survival gear and bug out bags ready to go for every member of your family. In this video, we are going to be talking about 15 preps that if you have not done these already, you should do them as quickly as possible. The first area that I think a lot of people probably want to take a look at is going to be their clothing, making sure that they have clothing that's suitable for different times of the year. Even if you're somebody like me who lives in an area where most of the time you have to worry about hot temperatures, make sure that you have clothing for those extreme cold temperatures as well, because you never know when a disaster is going to take place. And also make sure that you have clothing that is suitable for working, because especially if there's like a long-term disaster situation, you might have to be working outside quite a bit. So make sure you have clothing that's comfortable to work in, but can also handle the rigors of being in an outdoor environment doing manual labor. So having things like work gloves is important, but also make sure that your clothing is well maintained. If you're starting to refer to your socks and your underwear as holy molies, it's time to get more. And probably the most critical item of clothing that you want to make sure is in good shape and that you don't let get, too ratty is going to be your shoes. Because if your feet ain't working, you ain't working. So if your shoes are starting to wear out, they're starting to get holes in them, or the top is starting to separate from the sole, make sure you get some of those as quickly as possible. The next area of preparedness that you want to make sure that you have covered is having multiple ways to cook off grid. I think a lot of folks, they buy like one propane camp stove or something, whatever the case may be. It's different for different people. And then they think that they are set going forward. Now, while yes, having for example, a propane camp stove is good, and you want to make sure that you have plenty of fuel for it, obviously, you want to make sure that you have other ways to cook as well, because with something like that, eventually you will run out of fuel. So having something like a rocket stove, even if it's as simple as something that you made yourself with bricks or cinder blocks, that could be very beneficial. Also have ways that you can cook indoors as well. There could be a weather event going on where cooking outside isn't really feasible, or it's just something you don't want to do. And there could also be security concerns where you're not wanting to have a fire outside, and you're definitely not wanting the smell of food to be going all out into the air, advertising the fact that you have stuff to eat when maybe the folks around you don't. So having multiple ways to cook off grid, both indoor and outdoor methods, is extremely important. The next prep that you should take care of as quickly as possible is going to be to get a good utility cart. That could be something that you get from the home and garden section of like a big box store or a hardware store, or it could even be something as simple as like the little red wagon that maybe you played with as a kid or you bought for your kid. And with something like that, I mean, you could easily retrofit them with some bigger tires, build kind of just a wooden cage to keep stuff in so it doesn't tip over as easily. But if we're in a long-term situation where you do not have a vehicle, or maybe maybe your four-wheeler, whatever the case may be, being able to transport things like water and other items across longer distances is going to be extremely beneficial. I know that, if you live in an area where maybe even you have a pond on your property, or there's a creek somewhere nearby your house, carrying like big 5-gallon water containers or 7-gallon aqua containers, sorry, that's going to get very heavy very quickly. And being able to stick those things into a cart and roll them back to your house, it's going to save a lot of calories, it's going to save your back. And for those of you that maybe aren't in the best shape and carrying heavy things isn't feasible anyway, that could be your best bet if you are still physically able to pull that cart. The next prep that you should take care of is going to be to gather spare parts for important equipment. Just think of things that in an emergency you would be relying on that has multiple moving parts that could potentially be prone to failure. So if you have something like a gas generator, okay, air filters, maybe a spare carburetor if you're somebody who's mechanically inclined and you could replace those things. And also, I mean, as far as defense goes, I mean, extra recoil springs, extra extractors, stuff like that, that can go a long way to keeping those things that you need running up and going long term. And then kind of along those same lines, you also want to make sure that you have building materials that you can use to make repairs. If we're in a long-term disaster situation or even some short-term situations like weather events, there's a very good chance that you're going to need to make repairs to your home, and having things like 2x4, plywood, and then also nails, screws, and other types of hardware, that's going to allow you to make those repairs and keep your home livable. And also another good thing about stuff like that is that they can be used to create physical barriers that can make it more difficult for somebody to gain access to certain areas of your property. And it could also be used to conceal things on your property that maybe you don't want people to know about. Another important prep that you should take care of if you haven't done so already is going to be to gather sewing materials. If you're in a situation where you're doing more manual labor, you're having to be on the move, then, I mean, rips and tears to your clothing and your gear, they are just going to naturally happen. There's really no way that you can get around that. So having different types of thread, different types of needles for repairing different types of clothing or gear is extremely important because, I mean, I could use some relatively thin thread to maybe repair a tear in like a shirt or a pair of pants. But if I'm repairing a, like a canvas bag or rucksack, then I'm going to want some heavier canvas thread to repair that. And also you are going to need some heavier duty needles to get through those types of materials. It's also a good idea to have some extra fabric laying around. I mean, maybe there's a hole in your pants that's too big to fix. If you have some scraps of denim lying around, then you can go ahead and patch them up. Another really important prep to look at is making sure that if you wear glasses or contacts, that you have a spare pair of glasses that you can use in case something happens to what you normally use on a daily basis. Being in a situation where you only have one pair of glasses and you need them, that's not a good situation to be in. And honestly, that's something that I need to look into rectifying very quickly. Now, I'm not as bad off as some people are. I mean, I can still, as I'm making this video, I can read Sony on my camera, and if I'm at the range, I can still see my front sight and then the blob of whatever I'm aiming at. But really, anybody that wears glasses should make sure that they have a pair extra or maybe a couple of extra pairs. And the worse your vision is, really the more important that it is. Another thing that we as preppers need to make sure that we have taken care of is to keep our vehicle maintenance up to date. You never know when you might have to get up and go. So do things like make sure that you're keeping up with your oil changes and your scheduled maintenance so that your vehicle lasts as long as possible. Also making sure that your tires are in good shape. I know that's another thing that a lot of people like to use until the last possible moment. But I mean, these supply chain issues are just proof that you don't want to wait until the last possible minute because you might not be able to get the tires that you want. I mean, we aren't in a situation yet where they're completely unavailable, but they might be prohibitively expensive because prices go up, or you might have to opt for a more expensive tire because the cheaper ones are unavailable because they have all been scooped up. And your vehicle isn't the only thing that you should make sure is well taken care of. You should also be taking care of your body. Don't put things off. If you have a toothache, just go ahead and get that taken care of while you can still get to the dentist. And also, just in general, try to take a little bit better care of yourself. I know if you're busy, that can be really hard, but try to work out time to, kind of change maybe your diet a little bit. Try to exercise a little bit more. Try to carve that time out so that if something happens, then your body is in as good a shape as possible, and take advantage of your checkups so that you will know if there's anything wrong that you need to fix before things go bad. And then kind of along those same lines, if anybody in your family has special health or dietary needs, you want to make sure that those are taken care of. Probably the most obvious one right now is going to be baby formula. If you have a young child who relies on formula, you want to make sure that you have plenty of that set aside, and now's probably really not a good time to try to stock up on that just because it's very hard to find anyway. It's something I've talked about in some of my other videos in the past. And then also think about things like gluten allergies, cholesterol, heart problems. Make sure that any food that you have stored is going to be suitable for those people. And if you need any medications or supplies and you're able to secure those, try to get as much of that as you can, because I mean, while it might be very difficult to get enough of that to last for years, maybe you're in a situation where you only have to last a couple of weeks, and having even a small stockpile could get you through a lot of different things. And a big area that preppers overlook a lot of the time is to have ways to entertain yourself and your family members. Having things like basketballs, footballs, and then even things like board games, cards, and other stuff is going to be extremely important, especially if you have younger kids. So if you have younger ones, maybe set a new toy or two aside in the closet, so if something happens, then you can reduce the shock of whatever's going on with, hey sweetie, here's a new toy, have fun. And that could, I mean, be a game changer, especially for a really young kid. Another thing that you want to take care of, if you haven't done so already, is to have renewable ways of powering your devices. I have a gas generator. I love my gas generator. I think it's extremely important for you to have something like that, just because they can power larger things very well for a short period of time. So you want to make sure you have fuel for those. If you have oil lanterns, make sure you have plenty of kerosene and lamp oil and wicks. But having something like a solar power station also, I mean, a lot of people call them solar generators, that will allow you to keep at least small devices, things like flashlights, radios, and other things powered pretty much indefinitely. And some of the larger ones, they are very capable of keeping something like a box freezer running for a few days in between needing to be recharged. Having a solar power station could help you stretch out your food supply by not letting all the stuff that you have in your freezer go to waste. I know that is going to be the main way that I will use my solar stuff, at least in the opening days if we have a long-term emergency, is to spread out my food storage by keeping my deep freeze up and running. Another important prep to take a look at is being able to secure your home off-grid, and that could be low-tech things like tripwires, or it could be more high-tech things like battery-operated motion sensors, or like magnetic door and window alarms. And the good thing about the motion sensors is if you have like a solar power station and some panels, then you're going to be able to use rechargeable batteries in those to keep them running for a very, very long period of time. Now, of course, rechargeable batteries do wear out, but they're going to last a whole lot longer and give you a lot more bang for your buck than just traditional alkaline batteries will. Another important prep to take care of is going to be to have tools that you need to repair things around your home. And that's something I don't really see a lot of folks talking about. This is more on homesteading channels and stuff like that. But having things like hammers, saws, screwdrivers, adjustable wrenches, ratchets, then even some power tools if you're able to keep them running long term. It'll allow you to make repairs to your home during a disaster. And I mean, if you get some practice and you get used to using them, it can also save you a lot of money in home repairs while things are still good. And the last thing that I want to discuss in this video is that I think every prepper should try to diversify their income. The way that inflation is going right now, a lot of folks deal with that by cutting back on things. But if you can find a way to cut back, but also earn a little bit more money in the meantime, then I think, I mean, that's going to help you out even more. And even when things aren't like they are now, where you need a little bit of extra money just to maintain the same standard of living that you were before, then you can put that extra money towards preps, which is always a good thing. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. Y'all have a good one. Thanks again.